When a weary widower harbors a terrified Navajo widow for one stormy night, he has no clue she's fleeing from men masquerading as sheriffs, thugs who slaughtered her husband. What unfolds at sunrise will challenge his bravery and his soul forever. And hey, if you're loving these Wild West tales, hit that like, share, and subscribe for more heart-stirring stories. The wind wailed outside, dragging with it the sharp bite of the desert. Lucas Holt buttoned his jacket as he poured the last of the coffee into his battered tin cup. Life on the fringes of the New Mexico Badlands had hardened him to quiet nights, when only the wolves howled and the stars glimmered like distant lanterns above the mesa's edge. Since his wife's passing 4 years back, that quiet had become his shadow. His 7-year-old son Sam slept in the small bedroom off the kitchen. Lucas had just snuffed out the lamp when he heard it. A knock, faint but urgent, slicing through the wind like a murmur of destiny. When he cracked open the door, the sight stopped him cold. A woman stood there, barefoot, shivering, her black hair matted with dust and wind. Her dress was ripped, her shawl drenched from the night's rain. The glow from the cabin spilled across her face, showing fear and bone-deep exhaustion. "Please," she whispered, her voice rough, "just tonight." Lucas paused. Out here, strangers spelled danger, bandits, drifters, or worse. But something in her eyes held him. He stepped aside without a word, and she slipped in, clutching her shawl like it might disappear. Inside, the fire threw long amber shadows across the rough-hewn walls. Lucas gestured to a chair, and she collapsed into it, hands shaking as she warmed them by the flames. She said her name was Leela, her words halting, careful. "No trouble," she murmured. "Just one night. I'm gone at first light." Lucas nodded, slow. Questions burned in him. Where she'd come from, why her cheek bore a bruise, but the weight in her eyes hinted at something darker than the storm outside. He spooned stew from the kettle over the hearth and set it before her. She hesitated, glancing toward Sam's door. Her gaze softened when the boy stirred and poked his head out, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Pa, who's she?" he asked. Lucas gave a small smile. "A wanderer, son. Back to bed now." But Sam, curious as always, shuffled out barefoot and held out a hunk of cornbread to Leela. For a heartbeat, she froze, then offered a smile so faint it barely existed, a fragile thing, like something she'd forgotten how to do. Hey, if this moment's tugging at your heart, smash that like button and subscribe to keep these stories coming. Where are you listening from? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know. As the night wore on, the tension in the room began to fade. Outside, rain fell again, pattering on the roof like a soft lullaby. Leela sat, wrapped in her shawl, staring into the fire. Lucas watched her from across the table, noting the details. Red marks on her wrists, dirt caked under her nails, the faint limp when she'd walked in. She carried something heavy, grief, maybe shame. When she caught him staring, she looked away fast. "You live alone?" she asked, voice low. "Just me and my boy, since my wife passed." A flicker of something, maybe recognition, crossed her face. "The world steals much from good men," she said, after a long pause. Lucas trusted his gut. "You can stay till morning," he said quietly. "There's an extra blanket by the stove. I'll take the chair." She looked up, surprise flashing in her eyes. "You trust too quick, Mr. Holt," she said. He gave a tired half-smile. "Not usually, but you don't seem like someone out to hurt." Her lips parted, like she wanted to argue, but instead she whispered, "You don't know me." The words lingered, heavy, strange. Then she turned back to the fire, her face a mask.
Hours passed, the fire dimmed, and the cabin fell into near silence. Lucas sat, rifle across his lap, half awake. He told himself it was just caution, but truth was, something about Lila unsettled him. She was too calm now, too alert. When she thought he wasn't watching, she pressed a hand to her side, and that's when he saw it. Blood. A dark stain spreading slow across her torn dress. His grip tightened on the rifle. "You're hurt," he said, voice low. Lila stiffened, shook her head. "No," she said too fast. "Not mine." That didn't ease him. Lucas's gut twisted. He'd seen enough of the frontier's cruelty to know what "not mine" often meant. He stood slow, careful not to spook her. "If someone's after you," he said, voice steady, "I need to know." She met his eyes for the first time, fear replaced by something sharper. "You can't help," she said, firm. "It's done." Neither spoke for a moment. The fire's crackle filled the silence. Then, without another word, she turned away, and the moment broke. Yo, if this tension's got you hooked, hit that like and subscribe for more. Where are you tuning in from? Let me know in the comments below. Lucas stood, staring at her back. Every instinct screamed to send her out, bar the door, keep Sam safe. But a deeper voice, one he hadn't heard in years, begged for mercy. Maybe because he saw himself in her, a soul battered by loss, clawing to survive one more night. He sighed, set the rifle down, and stoked the fire. "You're safe here till dawn," he said. She didn't answer, but her shoulders eased slightly. As morning neared, the wind outside softened to a sigh. Lila slept curled by the hearth, her breathing uneven. Lucas stayed awake, watching the first light spill across the desert through the window slats. He knew the frontier didn't deal in miracles, but sometimes fate sent a stranger to test what kind of man you were. He didn't know Lila's story or whose blood stained her dress, but as Sam stirred in the next room, Lucas made a quiet vow. Whatever dawn brought, he'd face it head on, like every other day in this harsh land. When he stepped outside to fetch water, the desert greeted him with stillness. The sky glowed orange over the horizon, and the air smelled of dust and rain. For a moment, the world felt calm again. But deep in his bones, Lucas knew calm never lasted long out here. And inside that cabin, the woman by his fire carried secrets that would soon unravel the fragile peace of his solitary life. The first rays of sunlight crept across the Badlands, painting the earth in hues of gold and crimson. Lucas Holt stepped out of his cabin, feeling the dawn's chill on his face. The storm had passed, but the air still carried the scent of wet sand and sagebrush. For a brief moment, it felt like any other morning on the frontier. Silent, lonely, serene. But that serenity shattered when he heard it, the low rumble of hooves rolling across the valley like a gathering tempest. His heart tightened. Riders at dawn rarely brought good tidings.
He turned toward the shed, half hoping to see a lone traveler passing through, but the sound grew louder. 4, maybe 5 horses, moving fast. Dust clouded the distance. He glanced back at the cabin, where Lila and Sam were still inside. Something in his gut told him last night's knock had come full circle. He reached for his rifle, the one that had rested by the door since the war. As the riders neared, sunlight flashed off their badges. Deputy marshals. The horses slowed to a stop before the cabin, their riders cloaked in dust, eyes sharp. The lead marshal, a grim man with a scar below his eye, raised a hand. "Morning," he said, voice flat. "We're tracking a Navajo woman, about this tall, goes by Lila, dangerous fugitive. You seen her?" Lucas's pulse quickened, but his face stayed steady. "Can't say I have," he said. The marshal eyed him, then let his gaze slide to the cabin door. "You live here alone?" Before Lucas could answer, he heard a creak inside. He turned and froze. Lila stood just inside the doorway, clutching Sam close to her chest. Her eyes were fierce, protective, like a mother guarding her own. Lucas's breath caught. She could have slipped away before dawn, but she stayed. The lead marshal caught his glance and smirked. "Mind if we take a look inside?" he asked, his tone more threat than question. Lucas stepped forward, blocking the door. "You got a warrant?" he said. The marshal's smirk faded. "Friend, we don't need one out here. She's wanted for murder. Harboring her makes you an accomplice." Lucas held his gaze. "You'd best tell me who she's supposed to have killed." The marshal leaned forward, spitting dust from his mouth. "A cattleman named Silas Kane owned half this valley till last week. She cut his throat and bolted." The name sent a shiver through Lucas. Kane wasn't just a cattleman, he was a land baron, a man who claimed territory with bullets and bribes. Everyone in these parts knew it.
Inside, Lila's voice broke the silence, trembling but clear. "He killed my husband," she said, stepping forward. "He stole our land. When my husband fought back, his men gunned him down like a dog. I ran before they could finish me." Her words cracked with anguish, tears glinting in her eyes. "Those men," she said, nodding toward the marshals, "aren't lawmen. They're his enforcers. They wear badges to hunt for him." Lucas's jaw clenched. Her voice, raw, broken, true, rang in his ears. The lead marshal laughed, a harsh bark. "Quite a tale, woman, but the law don't buy bedtime stories." He turned to Lucas. "Step aside, Holt. You don't want your kid growing up without a pa." Sam clung tighter to Lila's skirt, his small face pale. Lucas's hands shook, not from fear, but from a slow burning fury. He raised the rifle, aiming it square at the marshal's chest. "You take one step toward this door," he said, voice like ice, "and you'll see how far I'll go for my family." The riders shifted, one muttering a curse. The marshal's smirk twisted into a scowl. For a long moment no one moved. The desert wind swirled dust between them. Then Lucas spoke again, steady as stone. "She's under my roof," he said. "And while she is, she's safe." The words hung like a loaded pistol. The marshal stared, weighing his chances. Finally, he spat into the dirt. "You just made trouble for yourself, Holt. Don't say we didn't warn you." He yanked the reins, turned his horse, and the riders galloped off, leaving dust and silence in their wake. Lucas didn't lower the rifle until the hoofbeats faded. His chest heaved with heavy breaths. When he turned, Lila stood there, trembling, her eyes holding gratitude and guilt. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "Yes, I did," he said softly. "You spoke the truth. That's enough for me." Sam ran to him, wrapping his small arms around his leg. "Pa, are they gone?" Lucas nodded. "Gone, son. For now." The three stood in silence as the sun climbed, casting light over the cabin and the open plains. Lucas looked at Lila and saw more than fear. Strength, a quiet resilience that had endured loss and betrayal. She wasn't just a stranger anymore. She was a woman who had lost everything and still refused to break. He respected that more than he could put into words. Later that morning, Lucas saddled his horse and rode the edge of his land, checking for signs the marshals had doubled back. Every few paces, he spotted tracks, proof they'd lingered too long. Trouble wasn't gone, it was biding its time. But for the first time in years, Lucas felt purpose. Protecting Lila and Sam wasn't just obligation, it was right. He'd buried enough of his past. Maybe this was how he made peace with it. When he returned, the scent of coffee drifted from the cabin. Lila stood by the stove, hair tied back, hands steady. Sam sat nearby, chattering with his endless questions. She smiled at him, a real smile, one that touched her eyes. Lucas paused in the doorway, watching, and a quiet warmth filled his chest. It hit him then. His lonely home, once heavy with echoes, now hummed with life. As the day wore on, he knew their troubles weren't over. The marshals, or whoever they worked for, would return. The frontier don't forgive defiance, but Lucas wouldn't back down. He'd faced grief, solitude, and death before. He could face this, and as sunlight bathed the red mesas, he swore to himself that no one, not a crooked baron, not his hired guns, would take another soul from under his roof. That morning, standing outside his weathered cabin, Lucas Holt felt something he hadn't in years: hope. A stubborn, fragile hope born of courage and kindness, the kind that made a man stand straighter, speak truer, and fight fiercer. Because sometimes, in the wild heart of the West, one act of compassion could change not just one life, but two.
If this story moved you, give it some hype, smash that like, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more epic frontier tales. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and let's keep this Wild West spirit alive.